What's happened before today? Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
Here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode, I think this is now 43 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network alongside Kevin Bohannon. My name's Kyle Sutherland. It's December, Kevin. What do they say about December? I know that November is technically what Frank Broyles said was the month that they remember what you do, if I can paraphrase that quote. But
it's they remember what you do in November.
And accent completely on point. But it's as true as that is, December is really when names are made and when people remember you hoisting trophies or making it to state championship games. And we have reached that point. We have 5 state championships this weekend, including 8-man, of course. So we've got 8-man on Thursday, and then we've also got 2, 5, 6, and 7A as 3 and 4A will conclude their semifinal matchups this week. But 8 games on the slate, and 9 including the 8-man. I keep saying 9 including 8-man. It's football, so I mean we'll and I write that for Hooten. So I definitely want to make sure we include them. But Kevin, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Before we get started on this, we got to go ahead and mention our picks last week. So you and I only saw a difference on one game, and honestly, that difference was Mills and yeah, there you go. You got your throwback on from 25 years ago now. But I love that throwback from the late 90s. But the Mills Comets.
I know Mills fans don't think that I actually went to school there, seeing how I picked against them the last 2 weeks. But I had to prove that, and the only some sort of color green shirt that I got on today. But yeah. Congratulations on the win, Kyle.
Well, if truth be told, and I said this on the show last week, I thought that Warren was the better team. I thought that Warren had a good chance of winning from top to bottom, of course. I thought that Warren had a better chance to win it, but what a game that turned out to be. And we'll talk more about it once we get into 4A, but one of the more exhilarating matchups out of the 16 contests that we had. But other than that, we saw pretty much eye to eye. We picked really well in a couple, and as you saw that we've also lost some as well. You win some, you lose some. That's part of it. Upset is not really something that happens this time of year. It's pretty much all, especially this week and the next couple of weeks. I mean, these are not upsets or anything. These are evenly matched teams for the most part. While there is some that maybe not be the greatest matchups for one team or another, still upset is pretty much a word we can throw out for the remaining 2 weeks of the season. But we will get right into it here as we start in Class 7A, as we always do. So, Kevin, it went about as not as expected with the PA and Bryant game. I felt like PA was going to compete a little bit more so based on the fact of how they did. Because really, out of every 7A Central team, or probably any team that Bryant has played up to this point, PA has competed with them the best. Really, if you take out that fourth quarter when Bryant's run game just really came on, but I think we're just seeing the dominance of this Bryant team right now, really to me, since Conway turned them over on consecutive drives back in week 10. When the Hornets exploded for 42 unanswered, I feel like they've just been a different team. They've been great all year. I feel like maybe since that point, they've reached that elite status. They only allowed PA, who was the number one scoring offense in the state, to cross the 53 times. So this defense was just exceptional. The offense did what it did, and Bryant really, they're frankly just looking like an unstoppable force right now. Yeah,
and Quad Sanders said, look, it's been 52 weeks. These guys know what's at stake, and they came out and played, and they got on PA early. And what we've seen, Bryant's hit everybody in the mouth this year. I mean, come out right away, maybe not start as well as they wanted to, especially in the Benton game, the Salt Bowl, but you could see on Friday night that, look, Quad Sanders had his whole coaching staff. That whole team was locked in on that one goal, and that was to get to War Memorial Stadium. And here they are once again. So now they get to play Bentonville, who they took care of business 2 years ago in the title game. So it'll be a great game, great atmosphere. You can't say enough about what Bryant did in the trenches on Friday night. That was where the game was really decided, and they just kept applying pressure. for them to get to Brandon Cobb as much as they did. You and I had talked about it. Elijah Hill, he had visited Arkansas State back in September. I think if he goes to Arkansas State, that's a really good in-state get for the Red Wolves. So that defense, they just keep applying pressure. Holding PA to 7 points in itself is enough, but to only allow them to cross the 53 times just shows you how dominant they were.
Yeah, no doubt. And we know that Conway played a really good game against PA as well, holding them to 12 points. I think around 300 total offensive yards, maybe a little bit under that. But, I mean, Bryant it really just one-upped any performance of anybody that's played the Bruins this year. I mean, really, it's hard to find a weakness. I think Sam Lane, who covered that game for the Democrat Gazette, was reading his article, and he just struggled to find a weakness. And really, the only weakness was I think they missed a field goal right at the end. I was flipping back and forth between games. I think they missed a field goal maybe in the first half and a few miscues, minor miscues that had no effect on the game whatsoever. But, yeah, they just played just about as flawless as you could get. And then you look at Bentonville, was in a scrappy matchup on their home field with Conway. It was back and forth. Grayson Wilson scored. The Arkansas commit, of course, scored on a 1-yard touchdown run with about little under 3 minutes left in the game. So that gave Conway the 34-33 lead. And, Kevin, you mentioned when Bryant and Bentonville played in this state championship game a couple of years ago, the way that Bentonville got there is Logan Tymason, who's now kicking for Arkansas Tech, hit a field goal. It wasn't necessarily – I don't think it was in the final seconds. It wasn't a last second, but it was under a minute, just like it was the other night. So Ryan, or actually, I think when Ryan Fernstrom hit it, the senior, there was 1 second left on the clock.
Yeah.
It was a 37-yard field goal. And what a great night for that young man. I know he had missed a extra point or a field goal earlier in the game. So to rebound in that way, the last game that you're going to play on that field for the Tigers, good for him to be able to do that. So another really great game from Trevor Grant, who's done a great job leading this offense this year. Bentonville, even though both defenses kind of struggled some the other night, you would expect that with how well both offenses is playing. It's not a major surprise, but this is the third time that Bentonville has made it to third consecutive year that Bentonville's made it to the final. They came up short in somewhat of a defensive battle last year with arch rival Fayetteville. And I know they're tired of being, they're ready to be the bride. They're tired of being the bridesmaid. And I don't know that anybody, regardless if it's Bentonville or whoever is up against them, Kevin, I can't pick against Bryant to not win this game and take their 6th state title in 7 years.
Yeah. And I'm there with you, but you got to look at what Bentonville's done the last 3 years, and especially this year, because they started out slow. But Jody Grant's teams peak at the right time. I mean, just look at so what? They lost some close non-conference games to some out-of-state teams. They ran the gamut in the 7A West, which was, pretty. You're going back and looking at it. Look, Rogers was, a touchdown away from playing in the semifinals or chance to play in the semifinals again. They put 49 on Conway the week before. Springdale had a better year. So,
and Conway smoked them. And I know it was week 1, but Conway smoked them, earlier in the year.
Yeah, Bentonville West. Yeah, that game was 55-21. And you and I talked about this. Look, it wasn't going to be the same game. We knew that. We knew coming into this, it wasn't going to be the same game. So Trevor Grant really grew up in that second half of the season, especially during conference play. They steamrolled Fayetteville. They took care of business. So for them to come back, and I know Coach Grant will probably – echo this sentiment that they didn't play the best ball game on Friday night. Defense, got out of places a couple of times. They got gashed by some running backs, but they stayed the course. They stayed with it. They converted 2 4th downs on that game-winning drive, which, that takes a lot of gall and intestinal fortitude to stay in there. Trevor Grant completed 2 huge passes on that drive. So, give it to them. Now they're here. They've been here. Now it's just about taking that step further. They've played Bryant close. 2 years ago is when we had, Jordan Walker came out, got pulled from that game, and Gideon Moats got put in. That was, when we saw that happen. So that, Jordan Walker's come a long way, but now you got a Myron Thrash. Now you got a Daniel Anderson. You got 3-headed monster back there in the backfield. They're just so good, so deep. I think it'll be a close game. Bryant just pulls away late in the game. But it's nothing bad against Bentonville at all, because it wouldn't surprise me it wouldn't shock the world if they won it, but it's just Bryant's to lose right now.
Yeah, we forget that, and I mentioned this on my TV seg on Sunday night about how we forget that the scoop and score, Bentonville got a scoop and score earlier in that game. Jordan Walker had struggled as a sophomore. I mean, the lights were extremely bright. Again, he was 15, 16 years old at the time, whatever it was. And Bentonville got out to the early lead, and kind of like the Conway game in week 10, Bryant just it really fueled them. Usually when you make a mistake, especially in the big game, it might make you crumble a little bit. It seems like Bryant, and that's what great teams do, is they respond when things don't go their way. So yeah, that's something to watch for. As we saw a couple years ago that Bentonville got on top, and then really it just kind of fell in for them after that. So you just got to get off to a stronger start and make sure you keep it that way. So that game will be played on Saturday night at 6:30. So that'll wrap up the first weekend of state championships, heading on down to Class 6A, which this one will be Saturday at noon. Kevin, not a big shock at all. Mountain Home, I want to make sure that we kind of like what you pointed out with Bentonville. Obviously, Bentonville's still playing, but we want to make sure that Mountain Home gets their due credit. Now, this game, I was not shocked by the score. The 14, not to take anything away from the Bombers, but I think that first matchup where Greenwood was only up 14-0 at halftime was a little bit of a mirage, mainly because it was a downpour in Greenwood during that first half. So neither offense was able to do a ton, but Greenwood's just, and this is nothing against Mountain Home. This is nothing against any team in 6A. Greenwood's just that much better than everybody in Class 6A right now. And again, that's not a knock. It's just what we've seen. We can only go off of what we've seen, and what we've seen for 13, 14 weeks is the dominance of Greenwood. And we saw them really kind of the same thing against Shiloh Christian. Now, Shiloh Christian, I'll say this, Kevin, Tucker Barnard has established himself. This is what, his second year. I mean, he's established himself as one of the state's top, when you're talking about the state's top coaches, he's there. He has sustained. Now, he knew what the recipe was for success, having been with that program before. But to do what you did last year, you move up to Class 5A, come back in that big rally against Pine Bluff in the semifinals last year, and then to go and do what they did to Benton. And there was a lot of big-time performers for both sides in the Benton-Shiloh Christian game. I'm sure you saw that. So Shiloh Christian, they forced – I think it was 4 or 5 turnovers, 3 in the first
turnovers,
half. 5 turnovers, 3 in the first half.
Yeah, so
Crazy.
7 total turnovers if you count turnover on downs.
Yeah, and so they pulled it. It was back and forth, despite Benton turning the ball over that many times. They hung in until really about late in the third quarter when Shiloh pulled away. But Jake Bodenstein came off the bench, 12 of 14 for Shiloh, 232 touchdowns. Griffin Mason, 240 rush yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 passing, 1 receiving, 1 rushing. You had 2 receivers over 100. Then for Benton, Maddox Davis, 230. I mean, both Elias Payne and Maddox Davis had phenomenal careers for Benton, and what a curtain call they had, even in a loss. Maddox Davis, 18 receptions for 238 yards and a score. Elias Payne, 8 for 172 and 2 touchdowns. So, oh man, I mean, just it's been a great run for Benton. I know that it's really been frustrating for them because since they last went to state in 2019, minus 2020, when they had to call off their season early because of COVID stuff. I mean, they've been to the semifinals the quarterfinals in 21, last 3 years, semifinal runs. So I know it's been frustrating, but still something to be proud of for them. But, Shiloh, doesn't matter what classification they're in, they pretty much punch their ticket to state every single year. And then also Mountain Home. Again, I want to make sure that we talk. Jacob Chenoweth, he set 4 school records this year. Phenomenal player on offense and defense. Coach Airy, just love that guy. Done a phenomenal job. Cannot say that enough. And I don't think the Bombers are going to go anywhere. They'll have a lot coming back for next year.
Yeah, and they knew going into that game that it was going to be, look, it's got to be an A++ effort, and Greenwood has to make mistakes. And that's just not something Greenwood has done this year. I mean, if you look at Kane Archer, he's at 54 touchdown passes and only 49 completions. He had 5 touchdown passes, 3 incompletions on Friday night. That's next level competitiveness right there on a big stage. That was 70 straight wins at home now for Greenwood. It's just uncalled for. They're going for their 12th state title in this century.
And I think they've been to 18 this century.
Yeah.
I think Walter
18.
Woody mentioned something about
this will be 18. Yeah. So
yeah.
just think about that, Kyle. For this century, since 2000, they would have won half of the state championships if they win next Saturday afternoon. I mean that's next level. That's a dynasty right there. So congratulations to Chris Young and then that staff. Cash Archer has just been an outstanding, one of the best defensive players in the state, if not the best. So
I think he's second in state history right now for I think it's sacks and either sacks or tackles for loss in a season.
I think tackles
behind,
for loss. Yeah.
Yeah, tackles for loss. Yeah, it's probably definitely tackles for loss if it's 38. Which honestly, if he had 38 sacks, it really wouldn't shock me either.
No,
with all that he's done.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
And
Kaylor Jasna,
only played in half the games too. So if you think about it, these guys have played 12 games now, and their starters have probably played 7 full games throughout the year, counting the second half that they've set out in all these games. So Grant Carnes, Champ Davis, the two main targets on Friday night for Grant Carnes and that over 300 effort. I think combined they had right at 300 of the passing or receiving yards between those two. So, but it's not just those two. They make it happen no matter. And Grant Carnes is always going to be like, hey, man, I got a great line and I never get touched. So that's the, he's always one of the most humble kids out there. So now to what Shiloh Christian did, Benton has to be kicking themselves, Kyle. And, the way they lost to Bryant and Shiloh Christian to book in their season with the turnovers they had, because they had – that's
9 total. I think they had, or no, gosh, it's like 12 because they had, I think 6 or 7 in the Salt Bowl. Yeah, so it was double digits in 2 games.
If you count 5, let's say 5 turnovers again in the Salt Bowl, 5 turnovers. That's 7 if you count turnover on down. 12 times they gave the ball back, and the other night Shiloh Christian scored on over half of those turnovers. So that's what's taking advantage of your opportunities, being opportunistic. When it comes in there, I saw, right before the half right there, Benton was driving, fumble. Shiloh picked it up. Now, Benton did end up scoring right before the half. It kind of shocked me that, Drew Davis came out there, played well. They just had turnovers, turned the ball over. They had fumbles, couldn't hang on to the football. So, Benton, great year. No doubt they'll be back with Drew Davis. It's going to be tough replacing Maddox Davis and Elias Payne, but they've got enough in that program that they can stay the course, and they're going to make a run. They're going to get back to War Memorial. I have no doubt about that. So, but looking ahead, look, Kyle, this is the game that people wanted because this is Shiloh Christian was the team that played Greenwood the closest, 11 points, 28-17. You go back and look at the game, Kane Archer kind of got banged up in the second half and really didn't play that much. Greenwood hung on that game. So, yeah, look, both teams have been here, but it's 5 straight times for Greenwood that we know of, and maybe
5 for Shiloh,
Shiloh. So now, not in the same classification, of course, but this makes sense. The 6A West showed that they were the best throughout the season. Going back the last 3 or 4 years, first round, the West is 18-2. Now you got an all West final. So, yeah, batten down the hatches. Everything from Northwest Arkansas and West Arkansas will be converging on Central Arkansas, and I think it'll be a really, really exciting game and it'll be very high attendance for this game, I believe, especially with what you have coming up on Saturday night with Bryant and Bentonville. So Saturday should be one heck of a day at War Memorial Stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think the 2 best teams in the state are squaring off in this matchup. But that's the question. Kind of like with 5A last year, you loved what Shiloh had. Bo Williams had another phenomenal year, and there's others you could point to. But it's just you ran into that machine that is Parkview. That is just you couldn't. Now Shiloh started to make a rally really once Parkview got out ahead. The Saints are never going to quit. It doesn't matter if it's 100-0. The Saints are never going to throw in the towel. I could see something similar like this. And again, it's just I think these are probably the 2 most well-coached teams in Class 6A, the 2 best teams in Class 6A, but Greenwood is just that much better than everybody else. That's kind of the way that I see this. And if you think about it, Isaiah Arrington, God rest his soul, he would have been a third 1,000-yard receiver that Greenwood has. And just Kane Archer, he just sees the field differently than so many other quarterbacks that we've got. I mean, it's just, you could go on and on and on. That stat about having more touchdowns than incompletions is stupid. I don't know that we're ever going to see that again, for a quarterback that's a starter, plays substantial snaps. So
at the 6A level too, Kyle,
yes,
it blows my mind. We've had quarterbacks that get over 50 touchdowns in a year, but they throw the ball 500 times.
Exactly. Yeah.
He hasn't thrown that many passes this year.
And as we talked about, it only played mostly in the first half. So
yeah, he was 17 of 20
crazy
on Friday night, and that was after going 18 of 20 last week. So you add up, over the past 5 weeks, he's had more touchdowns than incompletions.
And he's completing 81% of his pass. I've never seen – Owen Miller has set about the standard of 78, I think, his sophomore or maybe last year. But anything really in the 70s, I mean, that's pretty phenomenal. But, I mean, that's otherworldly once you get into the 80s. That's just – it's crazy. But – so that game, again, between Shiloh Christian and Greenwood for the 6A title will be Saturday at noon. Then on Friday nightcap, we will have probably the most David versus Goliath matchup that you could think of here, Kevin. And that is obviously no disrespect at all whatsoever to Farmington. But even Coach Tice had alluded to it the other night when when he was talking after the game. He referenced the 1978 Orange, which most of us were not alive when that went
not
down.
Even me.
Yeah, not even Cabo was alive for the 78 Orange Bowl, where Arkansas upset highly favored Oklahoma. He had talked about that, how he knows what they're up against. He understands how good Parkview is, that they are the back-to-back defending champions. But Kevin, you and I both picked Farmington last week, and it wasn't because we didn't like Lakeside. We've loved what Lakeside has done all season. They're a fantastic team, but even when they were down, what was it? I think they were down 29-7. Or they? I was thinking it was 29-7. So they outscored Lakeside. Had in my notes here 29-7 in the fourth quarter. So last week they outscored Fairview 21-0 in the fourth quarter, 28-0 in the second half. Then in the fourth quarter this week, outscore Lakeside 29-7. Of course, that 301st win for Tommy Tice ties Mike Malham for second all time. So congratulations to Coach Tice for that. Wally Walcott, a very underrated stat in this game for Lakeside. Wally Walcott, he started 19 of 19, and then his last 3 passes fell incomplete, but pretty phenomenal there. Grady Oman had 294 yards and 4 touchdowns. But Aiden Lester, the magic man, as Coach Tice calls him, hit Russell Hodge on it was a swing pass to the far side of the field on the right for a 25-yard score with less than a minute left to go. And ultimately, Farmington, they celebrated going to their first state title in over 50 years. 1973 was the last time they were there. So you love these stories, Kevin. Parkview's been the favorite, obviously, forever, and rightfully so for everybody all season. The Valley View game, it really, frankly, just wasn't close. They had 2 defensive touchdowns in the first half, did Parkview. They led 27-7 at half and held Valley View to 21 rush yards in the game to the Patriots 268. So great season. I want to make sure that we talk about that too. Sean Cockrell with what they have done, going undefeated up until that point, and just the consistency. I've mentioned so many different times, it's hard enough to get a program to being a contender, but sustaining that is a whole other different story, especially when you don't have a lot of history, as is the case with Valley View, just been around for about 2 decades or so. But I'll just go ahead and say it. Farmington is the favorite until somebody proves me otherwise. But Parkview is the favorite until somebody proves me otherwise. But Farmington, Kevin, they continue to figure out ways to pull it out. And if for somehow they did it this week, I don't see it happening. But at the same time, I know I'm probably going to end up on some board or whatever saying this, but it's just the Patriots until somebody else proves it otherwise.
Yeah, we've both had our fill of being on bar stools and everything else, which is cool. That's not why we do this, is to become a viral sensation. It's, to highlight these kids and these teams that are doing some big things. But Barstool Farmington, thanks for including me. My wife had to tell me about that. That was fun. But think about this. They've given up 55 points in a game. They've given up 65 points in a game. They've given up 75 points in a game. They've won 2 of those games. So, yeah, it's going to be hard to beat Parkview. It might be 82-56 or something like that. Not really, but Parkview's defense is just so good. You saw that, Jermaine Penny had the pick 6 to start the game against Valley View the other night. They shut Andrew Gartman down. They shut Jones down on the outside. They shut the running game down. They're just so good. Quentin Murphy, Emmanuel Bunting, they're playing the dual quarterback system. They would run them on the field, off the field. Murphy had a touchdown run early in the game. I think it was the score that set it at 14-0. Money Elston back out there, took a screen pass to the house. That made it 20-0. So they just used all the weapons they have. Have they missed Amarian Robinson? I'm sure they have. You don't miss a top 40 player when he's not there. So, but they've had other guys step up. So Cam Settles, he's going to be playing in the U.S. Army All-American Bowl. So congratulations to him, along with Grayson Wilson, representing the state of Arkansas. You don't have very many guys from the state of Arkansas go play in that game. Both of them are going to be future Razorbacks as of now. So congratulations on that. So, yeah, Farmington gave up 24 yards. I know Walcott had 330 passing. Oldman had 30 carries for 294. That's 624 just between those two, so it might have been closer to 700 yards. But doesn't matter. They were down 55-45, score a touchdown, onside kick. They covered 2 onside kicks in that game. That was huge for them. So walked down the field, scored with 46 seconds left. I turned it off, honestly, Kyle. So I was at my parents' Friday night when all this was going on. I'm keeping up with everything. Me and Dad are sitting over there, and I know he was excited because I'm going through all the streaming channels on YouTube, and he was like, I'm so glad you're here so we can do this. So it was really cool to do that. And we just stopped watching Farmington for a little bit. And I said, all right, so we're going to leave. And we're on our way home, and we have family in Farmington. My wife's cousin that she grew up with, which is like her sister, a couple years older. Her daughter's a cheerleader at Farmington. I was telling Amber, I said, Farmington was down, but it would be like them to come back and just make it something crazy by the time we get home. Sure enough, we get home at 9:37. My phone, I'd miss 37 text messages from you, Steve, everybody, everybody that I talked to on Friday nights about high school football. We get in the house, get Tessa down, and I said, hey, honey, Farmington won. She was like, yeah, 59-55. You can't make this stuff up, Kyle. That short moral of the story is that's what happens in Farmington right now. That's the kind of kooky stuff that's going on.
They've had some incredible athletic success. Yes. Between girls basketball won back-to-back, boys basketball went to state, softball won state, and they've had a phenomenal year.
Yeah, I mean, baseball program has been really good last, 4 or 5, heck, the whole decade up there. They've been right in the middle of everything. So, yeah, will they win? Probably not. But come on, you gotta cheer for them. They're the underdog here. They're going against the powerhouse Parkview Patriots with unlimited D1 athletes out there, and they're just going to roll into Little Rock and be like, all right, let's go. House money. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it will all go down, as I said, Friday night at 6:30. So a great nightcap that we will have there. Then on down to Class 4A. So the next 2 classes, of course, we'll be talking about the semifinal matchups this week. So we'll stay here. This is, I guess, the top of the bracket. I was not shocked. Now, Dardanelle, Kevin, you got to really credit. I thought that this was probably at least going to be a 2 or 3 touchdown game. Again, I don't say that as any disrespect to Dardanelle, but I just felt like Arkadelphia was maybe a little bit more, maybe just a little bit more as far as just depth-wise and everything than maybe Dardanelle had. But it really went about as expected as far as what we saw on paper. Both had been playing really good defense. Both had great offense that had just multiple contributors across the board. And you saw that with the score the other night. Again, we both had Arkadelphia picked in that one, so it really wasn't shocking from that regard. But You look down the Southside Monticello score, and Kevin, this Southside team has played really, really good defense. Like now, I know that they gave up 34 to. They've played pretty good defense for the most part this year, coming out in some close games. I know they gave up 34 to a Heber Springs offense that had two 1,000-yard rushers.
Yeah.
Southside I think this is actually the first time in school history that they've made it this far, and what a fun team to watch. We talked about last week how they're not afraid to gamble, especially on special teams. They had that fake punt the week before. Cameron Forey, actually, it was a 10-7 halftime score, of course, in Southside's favor. And Cameron Forey had 2 scores in the second half that kind of separated the Southerners from the Billies, and one of those was on a fake field goal. So that's another thing that I love just about the way that Kenny Simpson coaches, leads his program. But I do think that it's probably going to come to an end this week. Our Arkadelphia, they're my and I'm picking Arkadelphia because they're my favorite right now for 4. I'm gonna say that I like Arkadelphia right now over Elkins. That's the first time I've said that this year. Now, is it a major gap? No, they're pretty much neck and neck. But I actually do favor Arkadelphia a little bit more. And we'll go over to the other side here. Elkins, the Elkins and Malvern game was probably a little bit closer than some expected, just like the Elkins-Mena game was probably a little bit closer than some expected. And before we get into Mills-Warren, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll kind of let you elaborate on those, the Arkadelphia, Dardanelle, Southside, Monticello, and Elkins and Malvern. But I think probably, there was not really any surprises. The Mills-Warren, we were split on that one. But as I said, I was kind of on your side about thinking that Warren was probably the initial favorite. But as far as what we saw with Arkadelphia, Dardanelle, the rest of those 3 games that I just mentioned, I think probably just about went according to plan from what we expected.
The Dardanelle game, the Badgers got out to a 21-0 lead. So but that's kind of what we thought. Then it was 21-14 by half. That was a tough matchup for Arkadelphia with what Dardanelle has done on offense with Rod Chatton, both sides of the ball. Creed Vega he's going to be on the primetime performer of the year list. It's not probably a shock who the primetime performer of the year is going to be. But he's definitely one of those, 2,000, 1,000-yard guy. He's going to be on there. So, yeah, that was going to be a tough matchup for them on the road. It's just a tough place to win. So, Coach Phil Vega, they dropped down from 5-8. This is where they need to be. They're going to compete for conference titles, state titles. This is where they need to be. So, congratulations to the Sand Lizards. Great run. They're going to miss those guys. But they've got some coming back. They're going to be competitive. Had a great season. When you lose to the 2 teams that we think will play for the state championship, that's something to hang your hat on right there. But Southside, Owen McLaughlin, over 2,000 yards, Kyle, rushing, over 2,400 yards of all-purpose yards. That includes kick returns, punt returns, receiving, and definitely that 2,000-yard back. So that's something, you elaborate on it. This Kenny Simpson, when he was there the first time, he didn't have the resources. He didn't have some of the things that, you could really kind of see it coming. Southside was always kind of that middle of the pack team that can be a 3 seed, a 4 seed, but they really didn't have the resources to just punch through that ceiling and get there. Now they do. They're getting kids from Batesville. That's something that never happened before. You got kids moving into Southside. And, it's a fertile area up there. There's some really good athletes. We've seen it, with Melbourne in baseball, football, heck, even basketball. We've seen it with Southside basketball, Batesville basketball. There's always a state champion to come out of there in some sport up in North Central Arkansas. So why not the Southerners? Now it's a different story playing against Arkadelphia. That Arkadelphia defense is going to be they're going to be gap sound. They're going to be able to slow down that big Southerner offense. So this game will be played, if it's played in the 21-17, 24-21 area, I think that's going to favor Southside because they can maybe take advantage of maybe one Arkadelphia mistake. But I just think Arkadelphia is playing at such a high level right now that it won't be played that low. I think Arkadelphia gets in the 30s. I don't think Southside can get there. So for that, yeah, I'm with Arkadelphia with you. Bishop Allen threw for over 400 yards against Elkins the other night for Malvern. It was 42-14 at one point. They came back. Malvern came back. It was just Jaquay Walden was just too big. They're getting better quarterback play for the Elks right now. So they've got somewhere that, kind of uncharted territory for them. They've always been that team to come out of the 1-4A, go undefeated, maybe lose their second round game. But now they've got to the semifinals. They're 3-0 in the playoffs right now. They dispatched of Helena West, Helena Central, got past a tough MENA team that was right there for the 4-4A conference championship. And then they got Malvern. So you want to compare scores. I know we're looking ahead, but Malvern lost to Elkins by 14, lost to Arkadelphia by 11. So pretty close. You can't compare scores in high school football, though. It'll drive you crazy. Now to the Galaxy. Let's talk about the Comets. I got to show that again just for anybody that just wants to come in. So they got down 26-7. Had been losing fumbles, throwing interceptions, just penalties galore. It looked like, oh, man, here we go. Finally going to get to see, this is what happens when you run into a team like Warren. And then they came back. Were you there or did you leave? That is all you need to say about that game. Chauncey Haynes, the kicker.
Dude, he's a stud.
And Elijah Moody. So I have a bad habit, having coached and been around the game for a long time. A lot of people know me, even my Twitter handle is Baseball Guru, but I've been around football all my life and even got to call plays for a little bit, at the high school level. And so I can see tendencies and see what a team is going to do. Saw it the other night. Valley View Parkview game, short side of the field. Parkview had a trip set in a triangle formation. Valley View had one defender over the top on the point man. Bunning checks the sideline. I'm like, they're fixing to throw a quick screen out there. Sure enough, quick screen. In the Mills Warren game, 4th down, H back on the left, running back to the left of Moody. Hey, they're going to run power left. Sure enough, snap it to Moody. He runs 2 or 3 yards, gets the first down. So I have a bad habit of doing that. And I'm thinking, well, if I can see it, why can't the defense see it? Why can't the defensive coordinator see it? It doesn't matter. These kids, Elijah Moody, he is not a freshman. I'm sorry. That kid is something else. He's going to be up for every Newcomer of the Year award in the state. He should be. If not, if they need to create an award, create an award. I don't care. That kid took Mills to the semifinals as a freshman quarterback. Now, Mills has never been to a state championship game in football, Kyle. They've won 3 in baseball. They've won 4 in basketball. The 4 in basketball have always been since 2004. Last time they won a baseball state championship, you guessed it, 1999. So this is uncharted territory for Mills. It would surprise me, like we talked about it before. Every other classification, can Mills beat Elkins? Yeah. I talked to a coach the other day that said he thinks Mills will give Elkins problems. They've given everybody else problems. So what makes me think that they wouldn't do it to Elkins? It'll be a shootout. It'll be a 47-40 type ball game. And we'll see what happens at the end of it. The good thing is it's at Mills. Crazy things happen on Dixon Road.
Yeah, and I think I said just a second ago, so I might be contradicting myself, that I still like Arkadelphia and Elkins as my favorites. And while I do, definitely Arkadelphia is my favorite in 4A. I'll go ahead and get that out there. But yeah. I think, you know what? I think I'm going to go ahead and pick Mills again this week. I'm just because both of these teams are unbeaten. And as you said, anything can happen off exit 3. And a lot of good things have happened off. Pretty much all good things have happened off exit 3 this season. Yeah, I'm going to go with them again. I feel the same way I probably do, or that I did about Warren last week. I think Elkins, they might, and I say deeper as far as talent, but both of these teams are ultra talented. Everybody is at this point. Elkins, I guess, they just have the more proof in the pudding when you think about what they did last year and the way that they've been able to bring that over to this season, despite having to replace so many starters. That being said, I think I'm going to go with Mills. I think that it would probably be an upset pick, despite both teams being a number 1 seed, both being undefeated. Elkins has a little bit better strength of schedule overall when you think about the regular season. Yep. I'm going to go with Mills this week. I'm going to go with the Comets.
And, common opponent, the Warren Lumberjacks. But you cannot, like I said, you can't compare scores.
Absolutely, yeah.
Elkins played Warren in non-conference play, first game of the year at Arkansas Tech, maybe second game of the year, whatever. Elkins beat them 42-7.
That was in the midst of a quarterback transition.
Yeah, Cam Burks came in. after, the starter that everybody thought, so it's going to be different. I'm going to stick with Elkins as my pick because I'm afraid the Mills comments would be shocked and they don't know what would happen if they thought I picked them this week. So I'm still going to stay with Elkins. They've been my favorite. But the alumni in me, I'm always pulling for the comments, but I have to pick Elkins just because that's my job. I have to be objective about things. But I'm proud alumni of Mills right now. It's good to see those guys doing great things. Cortez Lee, they've done a great job out there of making it a place that kids want to go to school and play ball and have a good time in high school and get a great education. Mills, at one time it's still a university studies program. So for everybody out there wondering why Mills throws up the U, it's Mills University Studies High School, MUSH, MUSH. So that's why you see the U and that thing. They've taken on that mantra, using that kind of bad boy swagger that Miami had in the late 80s, early 90s. Do they play like Miami? Not so much. They're good kids. They've been disciplined ball club this year. So, as an alumni, I'm pulling for them, but I'm going to pick Elkins. So Coach Lee can, I'll be happy to eat my crow again next week, Coach.
And never mind. I was going to say the state championship time, but we won't have that till next week. So Southside will be at Arkadelphia, and then Elkins is on the road to Exit 3, as we just said, at Comets Stadium. So now that brings us down to Class 3A. And Kevin, I said last week, I think for the first time, that in a loaded field here that is Class 3A, Bismarck, they're my favorite right now. I just love the way that they've played all year. So I am going to say that they are my favorite. And what's crazy is I think probably the biggest surprise is that we don't have a single team left from the 3A3 after Salem took down Rivercrest and then Bismarck took down Osceola. So a little bit surprising, but then again, at the same time, I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that they might have cannibalized each other a little bit just with how brutal all those schedules are. But nonetheless, we've got 4 teams in the finals. Really, other than Fordyce, none of these teams are extremely established.
New blood.
You look at, that's great. Yeah, great point. Salem, I think, would probably have. Salem and Mansfield have had some recent history. Salem, I know about, really before COVID, had some really good seasons. But for the most part, it's weird not to see a Boonville in the semifinals. For a while, it was weird not seeing a Harding Academy or a Hoxie. Prescott, McGee, teams like that. And I know, obviously Harding Academy and McGee have kind of flip-flopped between some classes, but Bismarck, there's definitely some new blood. And Fordyce, credit to the Redbugs, man. I love the way we picked against them last week, and Boonville kept it close like we expected, but Zay Jones, you can't say enough about the job this young man is doing. You saw all last week of pictures posted about how he was out there 45 minutes to an hour before practice, having taken the reins at quarterback from the injured Cadillac Ellison. And so, Fordyce, this might be the best defense that we have remaining in the field, which is not shocking why they were able. I think they allow about 10, 11 points per game.
Salem,
Salem allows about 12 per game, which, man, speaking of Salem, how about that performance? They scored the 3rd, I think it was, most points. And the fact that they have held Prescott and Rivercrest to 28 total points in the past 2 weeks, that's phenomenal to hold these offenses. So Salem has definitely hung its hat on defense. There's no questions about that. But you think about Caden Brink has been a big part of what they do. Their quarterback, his name's slipping my memory right now, but has been a big part, especially on the ground. They run the football a whole lot. So credit to Josh Watson and what his guys have been able to do. And also want to give a lot of credit to Dumas. They were the lowest remaining seed in the field. They were a 4 seed out of the 3A8 and made it to the semifinals or the quarterfinals. But Mansfield, they got Daniel Burton back, who was out during the second half of last week's game against Newport, but he came back strong, finishing with 170 yards and 3 touchdowns, only 11 carries, which was even more impressive. And his brother Samuel Burton finished with 97 yards and 2 scores. So now, as I flip-flop back and forth here, you've got Fordyce heading to Bismarck, and then you have Salem heading to Mansfield. So you got a game in the River Valley this week, and then you got both games on the west side of the state this week. Bismarck, of course, hosting I think this might be the furthest Bismarck's ever been. It's definitely one of their best seasons in school history, if it's not. So I think we've got some phenomenal matchups in Class 3A this week, to nobody's surprise who's followed that class all year.
Yeah, and going back to when we had the Sonic Blast down there at Fordyce and talking to Coach Tim Rogers, I said, hey, how do you feel? You think it's better being in 3A? And he said, if we can stay healthy, I think we have a shot. When we start running into the Prescotts and Boonvilles of the world that have, 45, 50, that have a little bit more depth, that's where we kind of get in trouble. But I feel like we have the better athletes. We have some of the, best athletes, and they've shown that. When Gamble broke off the run to put them up over Boonville the other night, that was the first lead they had in the game, Kyle. Yeah, the game had been close, had been tied at one point. It was 20-20, then Boonville went up 26-20. But, Fordyce came right back, and Coach Rogers said the other night, and I love the guy. He's been there over 30 years. It's his 10th as a head coach, and they've won a couple state titles, I think in 19 and 21, if I'm not mistaken. They beat Des Arc one year. They lost to McCrory in the state championship another year, and they beat Junction City. So, they've been there 3 times, won twice. So, look, they've been here. They haven't been there in 3A in a while. It's going to be a tough task against Bismarck. Ben Keithley's back at quarterback. They just have so many different things they can do. DJ Keithley has done a great job. This team's now 12-0 in the year. They won the conference. They beat Prescott. They slayed the Dragon 33-29. That was big for them to get over the hump. Took it to an Atkins team and then shut down Tyler Bell in that tough Osceola offense. A lot of people had picked Osceola last week. I didn't. You didn't. Bismarck was the better team. They showed it. Defense came out and played. That was huge for them. They're going to have to do it again this week. Fordyce and Coach Rogers said, I don't know what it is about this team. They just find a way to win. They're resilient kids. They picked Cadillac Ellison up and, said, hey, we're going to do it for you. That's what's great about watching these high school kids go out there and playing for a fallen teammate. You saw it at Greenwood. It's a little bit more on Greenwood. Cadillac Ellison, of course, is injured. He's out, but, he's not on the field with his brother. So seeing them pick up and everything and take it to Boonville. Hunter Warren still had a great game for Boonville. He's, I believe he's back next year, if I'm not mistaken. He's only a junior. He'll be a senior next year. So Boonville will be back. That's, that you can't tell me they won't be, because that's just where Doc Crowley has that program right now. So I think Bismarck and Fordyce will be a great game. I think Bismarck is just a little bit better right now. They're a little bit older. They're a little bit more experienced, and I think they edge them out. It'll be a close game. Now, going to Salem and Mansfield. Mansfield's back in the 3A semifinals. We didn't think they would be. Next thing you know, they win the conference championship, and they're back. They're back in the semifinals again. The Burton's going off, like you said, 11 carries for 170 yards. Just outstanding night. Coach Antonio Lovelady, congratulations, man. Dumas head coach. Like I said before, we played against each other back in high school. Always pulling for guys like that I've had, known for 25 plus years. So it's good to see those guys from the 8-3A. Played against them in high school, played against Dumas in high school too. So, but Salem, man, the path to get there wasn't easy. Look, West Fork, that's a good tune-up game for them. But then they stuck it to Prescott. They had the game-winning Hail Mary, beat them 16-10, holding that offense down. And then what they did to Cavante Washington and that offense on Friday night was just next-level greatness right there for Coach Watson and his staff. So I think Salem goes on the road and gets the win. It's not going to be an easy road trip, but nothing is at this point, Kyle. I mean, all these teams are here. They're great. Look, you got 4 conference champions left. You got 4. So Salem, I think, is peaking at the right time. They're playing their hottest football of the year right now, which is what needs to happen. I think we're headed for a Bismarck-Salem state championship.
Yeah, I think Mansfield probably likes us picking against, because even since last year, I've certainly given Whit Overton his due credit for the phenomenal job that he's done since coming over. But I think they probably like us picking against them at this point, because they tend to do well. But, Salem is used to being a little bit overlooked as well. And I'm with you. I think their defense is just a little bit better. And I say that with respect, because Mansfield, I mean, hold Newport to 14 points. That's pretty impressive. That's very impressive. But I can't get and as you said, you can't compare scores, but holding Prescott to 10 and then turning around a week later and doing it to Rivercrest, just to those two teams back-to-back weeks, I just don't know that anybody can really do much against this Salem defense right now. So I am going to go with them on. I know this is boring probably to the listeners because we're the same on just about it, but I'm with you. I think that they are going to go on the road and get it done. So that one, as I said, or as we mentioned, they head to Mansfield, and then Fordyce will head to Bismarck to decide who the finalists will be in Class 3A. Last but not least, head down to Class 2A. And Kevin, neither one of us had this projection at the beginning of the season. Now, I think that we definitely – we had Conway Christian, I think, was probably in a lot of people's top 5, certainly.
Yeah.
Top 3 with Junction City and probably Carlisle. EPC was not, though. And a lot of that was just because you graduated. So what was Jacob Gaines? Jacob is the one playing now.
Yeah, Dennis
Gaines, who was one of the top rushing leaders in school history or in state history, over 6,000 yards. So you lose a guy like him. You lose Armar McCuston. You lose, I think Tyrus Reel was another. You lose your quarterback. I mean, they had to replace so many, but they play as Brandon Powell does. I say it every time we talk about them. He plays tough in softball. He plays tough in football. Both of those teams he's the head coach of. And they played Walnut Ridge in the non-conference play. They played Rivercrest in non-conference play, kind of exposed where that team was and the things that they needed to figure out. And they did. I think, 7 of their last 8, 6 or 7 of their last games that they've won, with that one loss being in there to Cross County by like 6 points. So EPC's on a roll. We picked against both of these teams last week.
Yeah, we were over 2.
Right. EPC, they got out to a lead. Mount Ida rallied a little bit, and then EPC ran away again. D. Buchanan and Jacob Gaines, as I mentioned, been massive for this team this year, both of those guys. But the Junction City game, I know that they're going to really be kicking themselves. They were up 21-0, and they've been a run-heavy team all year. That's what they've hung their hat on, and they've been very successful at it. They played exceptional defense last week against Carlisle, something that Carlisle really just hasn't had thrown at them. That translated over to the first half, but then Conway Christian just made the proper adjustments at halftime, only allowed Junction City to get 1 first down in the second half. So Junction City was up 21-0, then held scoreless in the second half. And as I said, that 1 first down. And Jaron Thomas, who's been great for Conway Christian this year, especially in the postseason, he hit Dagan Meeks over the middle for a 20-yard go-ahead score, and Conway Christian is in its first state title in school history. So definitely big props to the Eagles and Warriors both. I don't think a whole lot of people expected this to be your state final matchup at the beginning of the season, but let alone at the beginning of the playoffs.
Yeah, and Jaron Thomas on Friday night wasn't very good. He was 7 of 22 passing. I mean, Junction City really locked them down on the outside, played a lot of man-to-man, and just caused havoc all night. They made adjustments. Justin Kramer said, look, we got dominated up front in the first half. They hit us in the mouth. They were running the ball down our throat. They just took advantage of it. Conway Christian made the adjustments. When they made the adjustments, Junction City couldn't counter. Okay, look, we thought Junction City, the high they were riding off of, we just thought they couldn't be stopped. Conway Christian showed they're the superior team at the right time. So having that at Conway Christian was big for them. Now they get to take on a team that was there last year. So EPC's back in the state championship game, Conway Christian. It's uncharted territory for these guys. So I think it'll be, one of the best title games that we'll have, because you have, so many, I say unknowns. 2A is kind of weird because, you look at EPC only beat Gurdon 26-20. Mount Ida, almost beat Conway Christian earlier this year. EPC lost to Cross County. So, at any point it feels like a 2A team could have a bad night and just get steamrolled. So I think both these teams are playing at a high level right now. It's going to be a great game. I'm going to go with Conway Christian. Justin Kramer goes back, coached against him when he was at Little Rock Christian. I've known him since he was there. So, Kramer coached baseball for a while too at Conway Christian. They had a really good, talented team. I think it was 2017 They had only lost one game that year. They got upset by Desart in the quarterfinals. They had a couple 80-plus mile-per-hour arms on the mound. They lost that one, never really, got back on track from that. So, but Kramer's always a football coach at heart, man, and it's what he's always been. So I think the high-flying Eagles, I think they get it done and punch their ticket.
So this is, to me, about as hard of a pick of all the championship games, or really any of the games that we have this week, along with Salem and Rivercrest, like I mentioned a second ago. So I feel like it's so equal. And since you went with Conley Christian, just for fun, I'm going to go with EPC. Just because I believe in both of these teams. I think that they both played, and they've both played good offense or good defense for the most part. Both of them, you see what I know Mount Ida put up some points on EPC last week, but both are just sound defensively. I've watched a little bit of film on D. Buchanan and Jacob Gaines already than what they've been able to do for EPC. So I really love both of these teams. I'm just going to go EPC just so that way we have. So we got two differences this week. We got one in 4A and one in Class 2A. So I would imagine that everybody knows this by now, but let me go back to the background. Probably everybody at this point knows, but all these games, the state championships will be on PBS, Arkansas PBS. And as well, if you happen to be in the car or you just don't have access to a TV and you got a radio, we will have all of them on 103.7 The Buzz, as we always do. And Kevin, you'll be joining us for 7A, right?
I will.
On
Saturday
sidelines?
night,
Okay.
7A. Did the 7A game last year between Fayetteville and Bentonville.
Right.
I think third or fourth year to fill in for the sidelines for the Buzz. I'm excited about it. Reached out to RJ because I really hadn't talked to him. I said, hey, man, you want, I'm available for a few games. If you want to use me, I'd be more than happy to. It's a lot of fun. It's different for me because I get on the sideline. I see it as a coach, even though, moved over to the media side of everything. And I just hope it gives the listeners a little, extra look into kind of what to look for in a game and, just to make the broadcast a lot better, which, it's hard to do because you guys have done outstanding job this year between you, yourself, RJ, and Josh. It's a lot of fun every Friday night getting to listen to the Buzz crew. So just happy to be there for another state championship. But if you get out, Friday night's going to be out just Farmington and Parkview. There's going to be a great crowd there for that one. I'll be there for that game. Amber wants to go and take Tessa. It'll be her first football state championship game. She did get to go to Perryville and Atkins and see Papaw earlier this year and Uncle Bubba. So first trip to War Memorial for them, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. This is not only is it my favorite time as far as calling games because it's state championships, but this is the easiest time of the year for me. I've got a press box that I've got a ton of room in. Troy Mitchell, our guy, doing live stats, so I don't have to worry about anything like that nature. And also, too, got our man Jim Withrow coming on the Buzz. So having him, me as the color analyst, having a coach there, it makes my job too easy. It makes it too easy almost, just because that's usually my job to break that stuff down, but he breaks down the X's and O's, and I'll just usually add something to that. So, yeah, looking forward to it. It's a lot of fun. We love these times of year because this is kind of when all the media, they're in these state championship games, with whether it be in the spring, basketball, football. This is when we kind of get to all catch up with one another. So looking forward to that. And don't forget, before we sign off, I want to remind everybody, obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed there. Hit that notification bell. We'll continue these podcasts throughout the school year. Also, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen through audio platforms, we are there. But for Kevin Bohannon and all of us here at Natural State Sports, that will conclude episode 43. We will see you next week.